What was happening in your life around March 29th, 2025? On March 29th, 2025, we had a new moon solar eclipse in the sign of Aries at roughly 8 degrees. And now on October 6th, we are coming to the conclusion of the story that was birthed under that solar eclipse. And this is a big deal. Solar eclipses allow for a part of our egoic identity to die and be rebirthed. So with that solar eclipse that we had March 29th, 2025, there was a part of our Aries section focused ego that had to die, that had to be shut away, and was reborn over this portal from the new moon in Aries lunation to the full moon in Aries that we are experiencing now on October 6th. This is the cosmological narrative for October 6th and October 7th, Monday and Tuesday, and we're going to be covering the full moon in Aries, as well as some of the supporting aspects to create a narrative arc to help you delineate where this is taking place in your life and what the spiritual narrative is for you and what lessons you need to take away from or maybe even look for or spend some time contemplating on. Now, before we get into it, I am Michael the Hierophant. I'm a mystic and magi, and I have two quick promotions to talk about. The first is that every single Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, I hold my free weekly astrological and divination-based spiritual workshop, Consciousness, Conjunctions, and Conversations. You can sign up for the free Zoom link in my bio. It's an evergreen link, so you're always signing up for the following week, and you will get an invite for the following week's class. We go through the prior week's energy transits and the subsequent week's energy transits, and we tell bite-sized stories. We make astrology a little bit more tacit for those that are first getting into it. As we deal with all of these archetypes and these big symbolic pictures in astrology, there's no better way, I think, to learn astrology than hear people's mundane experiences of how transits showed up, because oftentimes when you first get into astrology, we have a proclivity to be a little bit fatalistic. We look at the most extreme versions of these celestial manifestations, when more often than not, I say 90% of the time, they show up in really uncanny and, like I said, mundane way. So we tell stories to help make astrology a little bit more bite-sized. We also go through the following week's transits, and I help teach you how to delineate where certain transits are taking place in your spiritual journey so that you can make better sense of the lessons that the creator and the gods above are incorporated into our lives, so we can continue on with our growth and our consciousness evolution, which is the purpose of this incarnation. As we adventure through this dark forest that we call life, we don't remember being here before, even though if we've been incarnate, we know we've been here before. What better map to use, what better compass to use to get us through that darkness than the stars above, which act as a constant reflection of our internal landscapes and the internal turmoil, as well as the optimism and the joys that we get to experience in life. So please, I encourage you to join me every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific for Consciousness, Conjunctions, and Conversations. The second promotion is that I have gotten a ton of messages and comments on both TikTok, Instagram, and personally, asking if I offer readings and if I do any sort of other astrological services, and the answer is yes. I put together a menu. You can find it on TikTok and Instagram. You can DM me on either of those, or you can shoot me an email through the link tree in my bio. I offer hardship and situational pricing, so if you're in a pinch right now, given the situation and state of the economy, I am not going to sit here and tell you that I will not work for you. Astrology is a spiritual wellness it's a spiritual wellness tool that we use in our consciousness evolution, and that should not be exclusive to just those who can afford it or the wealthy who can afford a personal astrologer. So please, I encourage you to message me. Let's get working on your spiritual growth. Let me help you interpret the stars for your personal story. So let's dive back into the cosmological narrative for October 6th and October 7th. So the big transit we are going to obviously be focusing on is Monday, the 6th. We are going to be talking about the full moon in Aries, which is peaking at roughly 14 degrees of Aries, and it's going to take place around 8:47 Pacific time, so adjust for your local standard time. So full moons in a vacuum, they're already about the completion of a cycle. That's why we tend to associate things like buzzwords like shedding and purging with full moons, because if we set intentions under the new moon, so say I set an intention or you set an intention in the Aries section of your chart to become X person by the full moon, the shedding and purging element comes into play because more often than not, we don't exist as a current template, as a current archetypal character, so to speak, that can achieve and accommodate what we are manifesting. So therefore, what do you have to do? You have to make space, and that's what full moons do. So they help encourage you emotionally to help clear out and make space somewhere in your life so that you can rebirth some new aspect of your identity. Now, moon, I'm saying the moon, but lunations as a whole, it's all about our emotional experience, and it's about the way that we emotionally perceive reality around us. So a full moon moment can sometimes be a breaking through where we are able to fully articulately connect with our emotional body, what we seek, what we desire, what we're feeling, and we might get a sense of clarity around it in the Aryan section of our chart, wherever that full moon is taking place. However, from a spiritual and intuitive perspective, I'm not saying that these other manifestations of full moons and lunations don't exist. I just tend to see that there's a narrative cycle that's coming to a head, a narrative cycle that's coming to a completion, and more often than not, we don't actually see the cycle come to a completion unless we're doing the work, which includes like meditation, journaling, where then in a week or two from now, when the dust settles and the energy settles, we can look back and we can see, oh yeah, this totally did hit the Aryan section of my chart full blast, but in the moment of the feels, I wasn't cognizant of it, because more often than not, we're not, again, unless you're being hyper analytical and detailing and journaling every little conversation, every little tidbit that comes up throughout the day. So that's the full moon in Aries, and obviously Aries is a fire sign. It's a cardinal sign, which means it's an initiator. It gets things going. And if you know a little bit of some of the basic stereotypes around Aries, Aries is self-focused, and Aries will often get a bad rap as being the narcissistic personality trait. That's the shadow side of Aries, where you become too self-involved with your own self-development that you basically say, screw the world, I'm all about me. And that's why the Aries is the symbol of the ram. It's like a stubborn, headstrong ram that's going forward, moving forward, regardless of what you do. And so that's the prescription of action with Aries in our chart. Wherever we have Aries in our chart, that's where we need to lead. It's where we need to be headstrong. It's where we need to basically not give a F about what anyone else is saying, what anyone else thinks, and we need to drive ahead. Aries is ruled by Mars, so you can think of Martian aggression when it comes to Aries themes. So once again, we have this full moon that's taking place at 14 degrees of Aries, which is creating a completed event of some story that was born under the March 29th solar eclipse. Now, we have a couple supporting aspects we're going to discuss. The first two take place in the first one perfects on the 6th. We have one that's going to extend probably from the 6th to the 8th or the 9th, depending on how sensitive you are to energy. And then we have a third supporting aspect that will perfect on the 7th. And so there is a subsequent series of narrative events that are taking place here. So the first supporting aspect we're going to discuss that's taking place simultaneously at the culmination of this full moon in Aries is we have Mercury in Scorpio, which it has just entered, making a square to Pluto retrograde in Aquarius. So what's Mercury in Scorpio doing? Mercury in Scorpio follows a similar drift thematically to Mars in Scorpio. Now, Mars is in domicile in Scorpio, whereas Mercury isn't. So Mercury isn't going to be detrimented at all, but it's just not going to have as easy as a time as Mars does. However, what is Mercury consumed with when it moves through Scorpio? It's consumed with death, sex, the occult, all dark things, all things that are catalyzed by major transformative events in one's life. Now, when Mercury moves through Scorpio, it picks up some of those scorpionic tendencies to be a little bit suspicious. Therefore, Mercury acts as a little bit more of a detective. He is a little bit more focused on the details and what the implicit meaning of what those details might uncover or might suggest about some other area of our life. Remember, the prescription for the scorpionic area of our life is that we need to transform and change all of those things. So wherever Scorpio is at in your chart, Mercury is going to be bringing up, hey, it's like little nudges, hey, this is something you're still doing, this is something you're still believing, this is something you're still acting on. You need to change that. That needs to transform for you to grow into your highest body of evolution, of conscious evolution. And so that's what Mercury is bringing us when it's in Scorpio. Now, Pluto retrograde in Aquarius has been working for months and months and months, and if I'm not mistaken, all the way back to March of 2025, Pluto retrograde in Aquarius has been stripping back and toiling the soil of the Aquarian section of our chart, so to speak, to show us where we have missed all of the weeds we left in our garden, and those weeds in the garden are blocking us from our service to the collective. Aquarius is focused with the other, it's the they, it's the collective, and Pluto is all about power dynamics. So these are power dynamics imprinted in our karmic spirit body that are preventing us from showing up to service through the collective. So when you combine Mercury squaring Pluto retrograde, what do you get? Well, you get messages from the underworld, because in modern astrology, Pluto rules Scorpio. So you essentially have Pluto working through Scorpio, Pluto working through Mercury, even though Mercury is in the superior position square to Pluto. And essentially what you might have is you might have a lot of conversations coming up about something that's a little dark, some sort of trauma, something that has to do with death, sex, the occult, very scorpionic tendencies. And it's going to be related with power dynamics that have been shifting since March of 2025, but also power dynamics that need to continue to shift, because we're going to link up this transit with the full moon as well as with Mars, which is tacitly connected to the Aries full moon, being the domicile leader of Aries. So obviously we have this Mercury in Scorpio squaring Pluto retrograde in Aquarius. Well, it's a square. A square creates internal tension from us. When we think of squares, we need to think of inside going out versus an opposition, which is outside coming in. So with a square, we essentially are starting with an emotional perspective, an emotional tension, an emotional frustration. And if we don't cope with it well enough, that could manifest outside of us. However, it could just remain a simmering pot on the burner, so to speak, in the back of our mind. So when Mercury is squaring Pluto, again, this could be frustrations where we're suddenly realizing and coming face to face with, via conversation or analysis or reflection, with power dynamics in our lives that need to change. And with the square being of the nature of Mars, that means that this is coming about based off of a drive to change something about the scorpionic area of our chart. Because let's look at where Mars is. Mars at the time of this transit is at roughly 10 degrees Scorpio. So Mars is our drive, it's our will, it's our motivation. And so we're being really driven and willful to make significant changes in the scorpionic area of our chart. And so with this Mercury squaring Pluto element, it's actually working on behalf of Mars, because Mars is already digging through Scorpio and finding all this stuff that it needs to change in the scorpionic area of our chart. And so with Mercury is again bringing to our attention some other new perspective or new power dynamic that we haven't addressed that will benefit Mars swimming through Scorpio and making those transformative changes that Scorpio prescribes. Now, I'm going to gloss over this, and I'll probably talk about it a little bit more in tomorrow's video because it'll still be happening. But we have a minor grand trine between Jupiter in Cancer, Lilith in Scorpio, and Venus in Virgo. And what that suggests is that this is all connected with our desire body. We have some sort of desire in the Virgoan section of our chart that's been being birthed over this past couple weeks that Venus has been in Virgo, and we're being supported with Jupiter in the superior position in this minor grand trine, and the grand trine is already of the nature of Jupiter. So you essentially have a very big component of the astrology happening right now that is of Jupiter's doing in Cancer. And so Jupiter is teaching us how to nurture and giving us opportunities to gain wisdom and knowledge and experience, so we know how to nurture ourselves better in the Cancerian area of our chart, aided with Lilith in Scorpio, which is showing us where we have basically untamed power, basically power that is probably being directed towards something else, an addiction, an escapism, procrastination, whatever it may be. And Lilith is saying, hey, you don't have to always act on that. You can transform that, or you can basically redirect that energy, like, hey, maybe you can't get away from the addiction completely, but you can use that addiction to power something, and that is powering our opportunity to birth and materialize some sort of Venus quality that we have really been learning to desire, or maybe cultivating or refining as it moves through Virgo, because Virgo is all about purity and refining. So we've been refining some sort of Venetian quality, and again, we're being assisted by Jupiter and Lilith here. Now, the final aspect we're going to discuss takes place on the 7th, and it's the moon in Taurus exalted in the superior position, opposing Mercury in Scorpio. And essentially, since this is coming off the back of the Mercury squaring Pluto, this is essentially our emotional body. And again, it's an opposition, so it's an external situation coming into our internal landscape. But again, what this suggests is our emotional body is wanting to feel safe and secure, or is feeling safe and secure with some of the changes we've made, but Here's Mercury again, bringing up another piece of information following the release and the completion of a story in the Arian section of our chart. And there's this new information, another round of information coming up in the Scorpionic area of our chart that is coming into contrast and juxtaposition, a conflict with how we're feeling about where we're at in our life right now. So over the day today, Monday into Tuesday, what we can look for is a lot of Martian and Mercurial energy. We have a lot of drive and a lot of intellectualizing around our drive, and specifically that drive is being driven to transform the Scorpionic area of our chart. But again, all of that is happening simultaneously as we're completing a narrative arc in the Arian section of our chart. If you enjoy these astrological and spiritual narratives, I encourage you to check out Consciousness, Conjunctions, and Conversations, my free weekly class. You can sign up at the link in my bio. And if I don't see you in class, I'll see you in my DMs for a reading. And if I don't see you in my DMs for a reading, I'll see you in tomorrow's video for Wednesday, October 8th. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday.